Welcome back to Face the Nation. Joining us for some more 2020 analysis are Jamal Simmons, Democratic strategist and host on Hill TV, Amy Walter of the Cook Political Report, and of course, our own Ed O'Keefe. Ed, you just laid out the crowded field. I was speaking to a Democratic strategist this week, or fundraiser, I should say, who said this is like waiting for Godot.
When we're waiting for Biden?
When we're waiting for Biden.
Absolutely.
And still not sure. Godot never shows up.
Right.
Is Biden going to show up?
I mean, if you believe the verbal slip-up last night at the Dover Downs, yes, he certainly made it seem like he is. You know, I asked him earlier this week when he was at this firefighters union event here in D.C. along a rope line, what's the holdup? He says there's no holdup. He just looks at history, which suggests that people have waited a little longer than this current crop that got in, you know, at the stroke of midnight, essentially, as the year began, and thinks that he has some time to spend because he's got the name,
right.
Clearly has some money ready and ready to come, has locked up some staff. We don't know to what extent the size of his operation will be, but all signs still point to early April, sometime before tax day, April 15th.
You know, Ed mentions history, and with the vice president, history is actually a pretty tough marker for him.
What do you mean?
Democrats, you know, he is very popular. People all over the country are hungering for him to get into the race. But Democrats have never elected a sitting or former vice president to the White House before. Democrats also, if you go back and look at some of the 538 polling, the person who was ahead in the national polls at this period, a year out from Election Day, did not ultimately win the White House. And there's only 3 times that person won the nomination. It was Walter Mondale in 1984, Al Gore in 2000, and Hillary Clinton in 2016. Hillary is a tough marker. So the vice president really has to, I think, take on the fact that he's going up against these trends, and that means he has to do things differently. He needs a more diverse staff than he has had in the past. He's got to be willing to talk about progressive issues in a way that's more compelling than he has in the past, and I hope that's what they're planning.
Amy, do we need new blood, as former President Obama suggested? I mean, he's not necessarily going to.
He's not the newest person in the mix for his years there on the Senate side. It's really interesting watching Democrats grappling with their choices this time. They have all kinds of opportunities here, generationally, on race, and on
gender.
And on gender. And it seems that the issue really comes down to this: how safe of a choice do Democrats want to make? And by safe, we all are going to determine that. The Democrats are going to determine that too in very different ways. And the safe being really who's the one who we know can beat Donald Trump. That's the question a lot of Democrats are asking themselves. What does that mean? And versus who's the most disruptive in this field. Waiting for Godot is a good description. I also think primaries are a lot like trying to figure out who you're going to marry. And do you go with the person who really races your heart, or do you go with the person you want to bring home to your parents, right? And Democrats...
And you don't think the two things can be the same thing?
Sometimes they can be both. I think Barack Obama was both. I think in 2004, remember there was that infamous bumper sticker that said, dated Dean, married Kerry, right? Dean was a lot of fun. And that's what and if you're a Democrat, a lot of Democrats will say, exactly, when we made the safe choice, John Kerry, Hillary Clinton, we lost. We got to go with somebody who's going to be engaging in a very different way. Just one more quick thing about engaging and broadening, going away from safe. It's also about broadening the electoral map outside of the presidential race, which is the Senate. There are a bunch of Democrats I talk to who say, we could win the White House, but if we don't win the Senate, then guess what? Not a lot of this is going to matter. We got to go into places like Texas, Iowa, North Carolina, Georgia. Those are the races that are going to determine control of the Senate.
Arizona.
It was such a rollout for Beto O'Rourke.
Right.
I mean, people are acting like he is anointed. Is this going to backfire on him?
Well, and I think to the charge that the media may have overdone it, we have to remember something. I made this point repeatedly in our reporting this past week. You talk to every other campaign that's involved in this right now, the one name that kept coming up in private conversations was always him. Is he going to do it? Do you think he can raise $80 million again? So this was them essentially goading us into saying, you know, they're scared of him, very scared of him. And this coffee shop countertop campaign that he launched this week by jumping up on countertops repeatedly, Was it you that said, I hope you brought the Windex
Yeah, you need
along?
some. Well, Clorox wipes. People are eating on those things.
You know, it seems to have gone well for him. And he started very strategically in southeastern Iowa, a part of the state where Democrats used to dominate and have struggled in recent years. And repeatedly people said to me, you know, they don't usually come to this part of the state till later in the primary. So we give him a lot of credit for doing it, and we'll see.
Amy, there's been some attention to perhaps a double standard here, that Beto delayed making an announcement. He had this sort of soul-searching played out in the press, that a female candidate of the 5 or so we have so far would have been punished for looking indecisive.
I'm
Do you
sure there's
buy that?
still, there is still going, and there will always be a double standard. When we look at whether they're candidates of color or women are going to be judged different standards than white men. At the same time, I do think every one of these candidates gets their little boomlet, gets their time to make their case. And this is why the debates are going to be so important, because all this is right now is sort of fluff. When they're all on the stage together, making the case that they have the best opportunity, I'm the best person here, to go up against Donald Trump, that's when voters really get to see what they're made of.
You know, he's a little bit. I would argue that Beto O'Rourke is the best natural candidate out running for this era, right? He understands social media. He's willing to engage in that sphere in a way that Donald Trump has engaged in, and nobody else really kind of can do that. What we don't know is, can he do all the other things that have to be done in a campaign? Can he build out an organization? Can he raise the money? Can he withstand all the hits that are going to come his way? Those are really big things. But you know, this week there was a little bit of an upset. A lot of women I talked to were really upset about the way he talked about his wife and raising their kids. That came up a lot. So I took it on myself to start calling around to some of the people and friends and family.
Because he said his wife mainly raises the children.
That's right. So I started calling women who don't live in Washington, who don't live in California, and asking them, Michigan, Georgia, Texas, Ohio, asking them what they thought. And the most interesting response was a 70-year-old woman relative in Detroit who said to me, oh, yeah, I saw that. I really like that.
Because
so I think
she thought
sometimes
he was giving his wife credit.
She thought he was giving his wife credit. So I think sometimes that things sound differently to people who live in different places, and we have to wait and see how this all susses out.
Which is why the process is so important. You haven't heard Democrats yet, it's going to happen, say this process is too unwieldy, we're going to damage the ultimate nominee by having all of these debates and this, lasting far too long. Right now, I think it is the only way to determine which one of these candidates meets all of those different criteria that Jamal pointed out of who's going to be able to raise the money, look like they can stand up to the president, be able to be inspiring, also have a pathway to the White House that looks to voters like a realistic path to the White House.
All right, well, we'll have to leave it there with the three of you, but more to come when we come back from this break with some analysis of the week that was.